Commander Zelthus stood on the bridge of the Voreth warship, Crimson Fang, and watched the display screens with barely contained boredom. Another day, another primitive species to bring under Dominion control. The sensor readings from the strange vessels near the Yellow Star showed nothing impressive. Simple fusion engines that burned inefficiently. Basic metal hulls with no energy shielding. Kinetic projectile weapons that would take minutes to reach their targets across space combat distances. His tactical officer, young Voroth named Kelmor, looked up from his station. "Commander, we have identified 5 vessels. They appear to be patrol craft. Scanning shows approximately 50 lifeforms total across all ships. Their technology level suggests they achieved spaceflight less than 200 cycles ago." Zelthus clicked his mandibles together in the Vorath equivalent of a dismissive laugh. "Only 50? Hardly worth the ammunition. But protocol is protocol. Target all 5 vessels. Fire when ready. We will leave no survivors to warn their homeworld. A quick death is more mercy than most species receive from the Dominion." The weapons officer initiated the firing sequence. Plasma lances erupted from the Voreth fleet. Brilliant streams of superheated matter that crossed the distance between the two forces in seconds. The first human ship took a direct hit to its central hull. The metal skin peeled away like paper in a fire. Atmosphere vented in white clouds that froze instantly in the vacuum of space. The ship tumbled, dead in the black, all power gone. The second and third vessels suffered similar fates within moments. Their primitive armor stood no chance against weapons refined over 3,000 years of conquest. Zelthus nodded with satisfaction. 2 remaining targets. "Finish them, and let us move on too." He stopped speaking. Every display screen on the bridge had suddenly changed. The tactical readouts, the communication panels, the navigation charts, all of them now showed the same thing. A single word in angular script: Terra. "What is this?" Zelthus demanded. Kelmer explained this malfunction immediately. Kelmer was not looking at his commander. He was staring at his screen with his mouth parts hanging open. Around the bridge, the rest of the crew had frozen at their stations. The Kryn navigator, an insectoid creature from a world the Voroth had conquered 200 years ago, had begun making a high-pitched keening sound. The Solthan weapons officer, reptilian and normally fearless, had physically backed away from his controls. "It is not a malfunction, Commander," Kelmer said quietly. The word appeared simultaneously across all systems. "Not just our ship. I am receiving reports from every vessel in the fleet. All of them see the same word." Zelthus felt the first stirring of something he had not experienced in many years. Uncertainty. What does it mean? Is it a virus? Some kind of attack on our computer systems? Before anyone could answer, the remaining 2 human ships began to move. They were damaged, venting atmosphere and fluids, clearly dying. But instead of retreating, they accelerated directly toward the Vorath fleet. Their engines burned at maximum output, pushing them forward on what could only be a suicide run. "Commander." The sensor officer's voice was shrill with panic. "I am detecting gravitational anomalies. Multiple points across the combat sphere. The readings they are impossible. Nothing should be able to generate spatial distortions of this magnitude without a black hole or a star." The space around the Vorath fleet began to ripple. It looked like heat waves rising from a hot surface, except this was the fabric of reality itself bending. Points of light appeared in the darkness, growing larger with terrifying speed. Ships emerged from those points. Not 5 vessels this time. Not 10 or 20. Hundreds of ships materialized out of empty space, their appearance violating everything Zelthus understood about faster-than-light travel. These vessels looked nothing like the primitive patrol craft that Voreth had just destroyed. They were sleek and black, their surfaces seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with impossible precision, sliding into combat formation as if they were a single organism rather than hundreds of independent craft. And they were big. The smallest of them dwarfed the Crimson Fang. The largest were the size of small moons. Battle stations. Zelthus roared, his uncertainty transforming into anger. "All ships, defensive formation. Charge all weapons." We are the Voreth Dominion, and we do not flee from. His words were cut off by a sound. It came through every speaker on the ship, through the communication system, even through the environmental controls. A deep tone that resonated in the chest and made the deck plates vibrate. And beneath that tone, voices. Thousands of voices speaking in unison. The word they spoke was Terra. The Kryn navigator collapsed at her station. The Solthan weapons officer was now curled into a defensive ball. Across the bridge, crew members from a dozen different conquered species were showing signs of extreme distress. Only the Voroth themselves seemed able to maintain control, but even they looked shaken. "What is wrong with all of you?" Zelthias demanded. "They are just another species. Just another enemy to be defeated." The Porothi engineer, a bear-like creature covered in silver fur, turned to face Zelthis. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried across the silent bridge. "You do not understand, Commander. The Vorath command kept it from you, kept it from all the warrior caste. But we know. We, the conquered species, know. Our ancestors knew. That word is in our oldest stories, our darkest legends. Terra is the death world, the place where evolution created something that should not exist. Persistence hunters who never stop, who turn every challenge into a weapon, who make war into an art form." The engineer looked at the screens, showing the approaching human fleet. They are the species that does not know how to quit, that sees every defeat as a lesson and every victory as insufficient. The Vorath have conquered 1,000 species, Commander. But Terra was always forbidden, always avoided. There are old charts in the archives with a sector marked with warnings. Do not approach. Do not engage. Do not let them know we exist. Zelthis felt cold spread through his body. If this is true, why was I not informed? Why would the Dominion send us here? Kelmar spoke up from his station, his voice shaking. "Commander, I have pulled our navigation logs. We were supposed to survey Sector 7F. Our course was set for 7F. But somewhere during the jump, the coordinates changed. We came out in Sector 7G instead. This was not intentional. We made an error. We stumbled into the one place in the galaxy the Dominion has feared for 3,000 years. On the display screens, the human fleet had finished forming up. They hung in space like a wall of darkness, their weapons charging with energy signatures that made the sensors scream warnings. The 2 dying patrol craft had reached the Vorath formation and exploded, their fusion cores detonating in brilliant spheres of light. But Zelsis barely noticed them. He was staring at the fleet before him and finally understanding the truth. This was not first contact. This was an ambush that had been waiting for 3,000 years. And the Vorath had finally triggered the trap. Admiral Sarah Chen sat in a chair 2 kilometers beneath the surface of Earth, in a command center that had been built over a century ago for exactly this moment. The walls around her were covered with display screens, showing data streams from across human space. Every colony world, every orbital station, every ship in the fleet was connected to this room through quantum communication relays that allowed instant contact regardless of distance. On the main screen, she watched the recording of the Voroth attack. The 3 patrol ships had died quickly, their crews given no chance to respond or retreat. 47 people had been on those vessels. 47 volunteers who had known exactly what their mission was. They had families who would mourn them. They had dreams they would never achieve, but they had died triggering the alert that humanity had waited 200 years to send. Chen was 63 years old. She had joined the Defense Force when she was 18. Back when it was still called the Space Guard and pretended to be nothing more than a law enforcement agency. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for this day. Every simulation, every training exercise, every strategic planning session had been building toward this moment. And now that it was here, she felt strangely calm. Her second-in-command, Captain Marcus Webb, stood beside her chair. "All fleet elements report ready, Admiral. We have 412 vessels in position around Sector 7G, another 800 standing by in reserve positions. The Vorath don't know we're there yet. The stealth systems are holding." Chen nodded slowly. "What about the colonial response?" Are they maintaining the charade? Yes, ma'am. All colony worlds are broadcasting distress calls on primitive radio frequencies, making it look like they've just learned about the attack and are panicking. The acting is quite good, actually. Governor Martinez on New Hope is particularly convincing in her terror. She should be, Chen said dryly. She was a professional actress before she went into politics. Make sure someone records her performance. It might be useful for training future generations. She paused, her finger hovering over the control panel. This is it, Marcus. 200 years of preparation. 200 years of every human child being taught about the Vorath threat. 200 years of building weapons in secret while pretending to struggle with basic technology. Are we ready? Marcus smiled grimly. Admiral, we were ready 50 years ago. We've been getting impatient. Chen pressed the button. Across 50 star systems, the signal went out simultaneously. Terra Actual Code Black Sector 7G. It was not a request for permission. It was not a warning. It was a simple statement of fact. The trap had been triggered. The response was now in motion. In orbit around Mars, shipyards that were supposedly building slow cargo vessels suddenly opened their outer shells. Inside were warships that had been constructed over decades, hidden in plain sight. The cargo ships had been real enough. But they were just shells around military vessels that incorporated technology the Vorath didn't know was possible. Zero-point energy generators that could power a city from a device the size of a briefcase. Weapons that manipulated space-time itself to tear targets apart at the molecular level. Defensive systems that bent light and gravity, making ships effectively invisible to conventional sensors. Around Jupiter, mining stations that had been operating for 100 years suddenly came alive. They weren't mining stations at all. They were weapons platforms, each one capable of destroying a planet. They had been placed there by the first generation of human space travelers, who had understood even then that Earth needed defenses. The miners who had worked there over the years had all been military personnel maintaining the systems and waiting for orders out in the asteroid belt. Thousands of rocks that had been slowly drifting in predictable orbits suddenly changed course. They weren't natural asteroids. They were bombs, each one carrying a fusion warhead powerful enough to vaporize a city. They had been placed over decades by ships that appeared to be simple research vessels. Now they were moving into position along every possible approach route to Earth and at the edge of the solar system, where the Oort cloud drifted in the darkness. The largest weapons platform ever constructed by humanity powered up its main systems. It was called Terra's Shield, and it was a mobile fortress the size of a small moon. It had taken 3 generations to build, with work crews living and dying in the outer dark, all keeping the secret. Its weapons could sterilize a planet from a light year away. Its sensors could detect a ship moving through hyperspace from 10 light years away. It had been waiting in silence for 2 centuries, its crew in cryogenic sleep, ready to wake when the call came. Chen watched as the tactical display updated in real time. Green icons appeared across the map as human forces dropped their camouflage and revealed themselves. The Vorath had thought they were attacking a primitive species that had barely mastered faster-than-light travel. They were about to learn the truth, but the ships and weapons were only half of the plan. The other half was psychological, and it was far more devastating. 200 years ago, when humanity first detected the Vorath Dominion burning worlds across the galaxy, they had made a decision. They would not reveal themselves. They would not make first contact. They would watch and wait and learn everything they could about their enemy. And they had learned something crucial. The Vorath were conquerors, but they were also suppressors of information. When they conquered a species, they tried to erase that species' history and culture, to make them forget who they had been. But you cannot completely erase memory. Stories survive. Legends persist. And humanity had exploited that weakness, using stealth ships that the Vorath never detected. Human operatives had infiltrated conquered worlds. They had not tried to start rebellions or cause trouble. They had simply told stories. Stories about a world called Terra, a death world where gravity was stronger and diseases. more virulent and predators more deadly than anywhere else in the known galaxy. A world that had created a species that survived by being tougher, meaner, and more stubborn than anything else evolution had ever produced. The stories spread through the underground networks of conquered peoples. They became legends, myths, whispered hopes. The humans from Terra were coming. Someday they would arrive, and the Vorath would finally face something they couldn't defeat. It was propaganda, of course, but the best propaganda is based on truth. And the truth was that humanity had spent 200 years doing nothing but preparing to fight the Vorath. Chen had studied the psychology extensively. The Vorath warrior caste was brave and disciplined, but they had conquered so many species that they had become arrogant. They expected to win. They expected their enemies to break and run, but their conquered subjects, the ones who served in their fleets and worked in their factories, they remembered the old stories. And when they heard the word Terra, something deep in their cultural memory would activate: fear, hope, recognition. The beauty of it was that the Vorath High Command knew about Terra. They had old navigation charts that marked human space as forbidden. But the warrior caste, the ones who actually did the fighting, they had never been told. The High Command had thought that keeping it secret would protect them. Instead, it had created a situation where Vorath officers would face an enemy they didn't understand while their own crews collapsed in terror. On the screen, Chen watched the human fleet materialize around the Vorath vessels and sector. 7G-412 warships appearing simultaneously, their presence announced by a single word broadcast on all frequencies. Terra. All ships, Chen said calmly into her communicator. You are weapons-free. Disable, but do not destroy. We need survivors to carry the message home. Let them see what happens when you attack Terra. Let them understand what we have been building, while they thought we were primitive and harmless. And let them know that this is just the beginning. The response came back from 412 captains simultaneously. Understood, Admiral? For Terra. Chen leaned back in her chair and watched the battle begin. It would be over quickly. The Vorath were skilled and experienced, but they were fighting with tactics and technology that were centuries old. Humanity had spent 200 years studying every battle the Vorath had ever fought, analyzing their strategies, identifying their weaknesses. This wasn't combat. This was an examination. The Vorath were about to fail spectacularly. Commander Zelthus tried to maintain control of his bridge, but chaos was spreading like a virus through his crew. The tactical display had become a nightmare of red warning indicators. Human ships were everywhere, moving with speed and precision that should have been impossible. They appeared on sensors and then vanished again, their stealth technology making them flicker in and out of detectability. When they fired, their weapons produced energy signatures that made no sense according to known physics. A beam of purple light lanced from one of the human vessels and struck the Vorath cruiser Eternal Triumph. The beam didn't explode or burn through the hull. Instead, it seemed to make the ship simply stop working. All power died instantly. Life support, weapons, engines, everything went dark. The cruiser drifted, dead in space, its crew trapped inside a metal coffin that was quickly losing heat in the freezing vacuum. Evasive maneuvers. Zelthius shouted. Return fire. All ships. Form defensive sphere and concentrate fire on. He stopped as another human weapon struck the destroyer. Blood oath. This time the effect was different. The destroyer's hull began to ripple and distort, as if the metal itself was becoming liquid. Within seconds, the entire ship had collapsed inward on itself. Crushed by some invisible force into a ball of compressed matter no larger than a ground transport vehicle. Kelmer's voice was high with panic. Commander, we are receiving reports from across the fleet. We cannot target the human vessels effectively. When we lock weapons on them, they simply disappear and reappear elsewhere. When we do score hits, our plasma lances pass through them as if they are not there. I think some of them are not real. They are projections. Holograms. We are wasting ammunition on images, while the real ships attack from different angles. The Kryn navigator was still making that awful keening sound. The Sultan weapons officer had abandoned his post entirely and was huddled in a corner of the bridge. Other crew members from conquered species were showing similar signs of complete psychological collapse. Only the Vorath crew members were still trying to function, but even they looked shaken. "This cannot be happening," Zelthus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "They are primitives. We saw their patrol ships, basic fusion drives, kinetic weapons. How can they have this technology?" The Porathi engineer had managed to remain at his station despite his obvious fear. He looked up at Zelthius with something like pity in his eyes. "Because it was a lie, Commander. Everything we saw was a lie. Those patrol ships were bait. They wanted us to attack. They wanted us to think they were weak. It is what Terra does. They studied the Vorath for generations. They learned how you think, how you assess threats, and they showed you exactly what you expected to see." Zelthus wanted to argue, but the evidence was overwhelming. The human fleet was not just defeating them, it was toying with them. Ships would approach close enough to be hit, then vanish just as weapons fired. Others would take hits deliberately, their shields absorbing damage that should have destroyed them. Just to demonstrate how outmatched the Vorath were. It was psychological warfare of the most brutal kind. "Communications," Zelthus ordered. "Send a distress signal to Dominion High Command. Tell them we have encountered Terra. Tell them communications are jammed." "Commander," the communications officer reported. "The humans are broadcasting on all frequencies. I cannot send any signal beyond local range. We are cut off." "Okay." A new voice suddenly filled the bridge. It came through the ship's speakers in perfect Vorath language, calm and professional. "Vorath vessels. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. You fired on our patrol craft without warning or provocation. You killed 47 civilians who were simply monitoring their assigned sector. Under the laws of war recognized by the Galactic Council, you're fully justified in destroying your entire fleet and salting the worlds you came from. However, we are not the Vorath. We do not believe in genocide or unnecessary slaughter. Therefore, we are offering you one chance. Power down your weapons and engines. Prepare to be boarded. Any ship that continues to fight will be disabled, and its crew will face trial for war crimes. You have 60 seconds to comply." Zelthus looked around his bridge. Half his crew was non-functional. The tactical situation was hopeless. Every ship that had tried to fight back had been eliminated within seconds. And yet, everything in his training and culture screamed at him to resist. The Vorath did not surrender. The Vorath did not show weakness. To do so was to invite extinction. But then he thought about what the Porathi engineer had said. Terra had studied them. They knew how Vorath thought, which meant they knew that Vorath warriors would rather die than surrender. And if they knew that, why were they offering terms? Because they wanted survivors. They wanted someone to go home and tell the story. They wanted the Dominion to know what had happened here. The realization hit Zelthius like a physical blow. This entire engagement had been designed not to destroy the Vorath fleet, but to send a message. Every death, every disabled ship, every demonstration of superior technology, all of it was theater. The humans were making a point. "Stand down," Zelthus said quietly. "All ships, cease fire and power down weapons. We surrender." The bridge went silent. Several Vorath crew members stared at their commander in shock. To surrender was unthinkable. It was the ultimate dishonor. But Kelmar, who had served with Zelthus for 20 years, understood immediately. He began issuing the orders to the fleet. Some ships obeyed. Others tried to continue fighting and were disabled within seconds, exactly as the human admiral had promised. 11 minutes. That was how long the battle lasted from first contact to final surrender. The Vorath 7th Fleet had numbered 432 vessels when they entered the sector. Now, 73 ships remained operational, but powerless. The rest were either destroyed or disabled, drifting in space with their systems dead. Zelthus did not know how many crew members had died. Thousands, certainly. Maybe tens of thousands. And for what? To deliver a message that the Dominion would not want to hear? The human ships began approaching the disabled Vorath vessels. Teams in armored suits crossed the distance between ships and began cutting through airlocks. They were efficient and professional, securing each vessel quickly and with minimal violence. Crew members who resisted were stunned with some kind of electrical weapon. Those who cooperated were escorted to holding areas. Medical teams followed behind, treating the wounded without discrimination between Vorath and conquered species. On the Crimson Fang, the airlock opened and human soldiers entered the bridge. They moved like trained warriors, weapons ready, but not firing. They secured the room in seconds, and then a figure in different armor entered behind them. The armor was black with silver markings, and when the helmet retracted, it revealed the face of an older human female with short gray hair and dark eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. "Commander Zelthus, I assume," the human said in perfect Vorath. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen. You and I need to have a conversation about the future of the Vorath Dominion and its relationship with Terra." Zelthus straightened, trying to maintain some dignity despite his defeat. "I am a warrior of the Dominion. I do not negotiate with enemies. Kill me or imprison me, but I will tell you nothing." Chen smiled, but it was not a warm expression. It was the smile of someone who had expected exactly that response and had planned for it. "Oh, Commander, you misunderstand. I am not here to interrogate you. I am here to give you information. Information that you will carry back to your Emperor? Information about what happens next." She gestured, and one of the soldiers brought up a portable display screen. It showed a star map of the galaxy, with the Vorath Dominion highlighted in red. It was vast, spanning thousands of systems across multiple spiral arms. But as Zelthus watched, green markers began appearing throughout the red territory. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. These markers represent human operatives currently positioned within Vorath space, Chen explained calmly. "We have been infiltrating your empire for 200 years. We have people in your shipyards, your factories, your communication networks, even your government. We know the location of every military installation. We know your supply lines, your defensive positions, your classified research facilities. We know which of your subject species are most likely to rebel, and which planets are most vulnerable to blockade." She zoomed the display in on a particular system, the Vorath homeworld. Even there, green markers were visible. "We have assets on your homeworld, Commander. Sleeper agents who have been living normal lives waiting for activation. Some of them have been there for 3 generations. They have families. They are part of your society, and when we give the order, they will act." Zelthus felt cold spread through his entire body. "You are lying. Our security would have detected infiltrators, would they?" Chen asked. "Tell me, Commander, in all your years of service, have you ever met a human? Have you ever seen what we actually look like?" The Vorath High Command kept that information suppressed. They did not want their warriors to know about Terra because they knew it would create fear. But that suppression made it trivially easy for us to insert operatives. We used makeup, surgery, genetic modification. We sent people who were willing to spend their entire lives undercover, pretending to be Vorath or members of conquered species. All for this moment. She closed the display and looked directly into Zelthus's eyes. "You are going to return to the Dominion Commander. You and your surviving crew. You are going to tell them everything you saw here. You are going to tell them that Terra is real, that we have been watching them for centuries, and that we are done watching. You are going to deliver our terms. The Dominion will cease all military operations immediately. You will withdraw to your core systems. You will release every conquered species and allow them to govern themselves. And if you refuse, we will not simply defeat you in battle. We will dismantle your entire civilization piece by piece until nothing remains but a warning to others." Zelthus stared at the human admiral, trying to find some sign that she was bluffing, but there was nothing but certainty in those dark eyes. "The Dominion will never surrender to an enemy. We have fought for 3,000 years to build our empire. You think one battle will make us abandon everything?" Chun's smile returned, colder than before. "Commander, you still do not understand. This was not a battle. This was an announcement. We have been preparing for war with the Vorath for 200 years. Every human child is taught about you in school. Every resource, every innovation, every strategic decision we have made has been with this conflict in mind. You are not our enemy. You are our purpose. You are the reason we exist. And now that you have given us justification by firing first, we are coming for you. She turned to leave, then paused at the airlock. One more thing, Commander. That word you saw on your screens, Terra. It was not just for you. It was a signal to every conquered species in your empire. A signal they have been waiting for. When you return home, you will find that your empire is already beginning to burn. We did not just prepare to fight the Vorath. We prepared to free everyone you have enslaved. This is not a war, Commander. This is liberation. And it begins now. Emperor Krathus stood in the war room of the Imperial Palace and tried to make sense of the reports flooding in. From across the Dominion, the chamber was vast, its walls covered with holographic displays showing every corner of Vorath space. Usually, those displays showed the steady red glow of Imperial control, occasional yellow flickers indicating minor rebellions or border skirmishes. Now, the displays were a chaotic mess of red, yellow, and alarming amounts of green dot. The High Marshal, Vecthan, stood beside the Emperor's throne. He was old for a Vorath, his carapace scarred from 100 battles, his mandibles worn from decades of command. Your Majesty, we have confirmed reports from the 7th Fleet. Commander Zelthus, his surviving officers have been released by the humans. They are in transit back to the core worlds now. But the story they tell is, he paused, searching for words. It is difficult to accept. Tell me, Krathus ordered. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made his advisors nervous. The Emperor was known for his temper when faced with bad news. Vecthan activated a recording. Commander Zelthus appeared on the screen, his image transmitted from his ship. He looked older than he had before the battle, as if something fundamental had broken inside him. He spoke in a monotone, reciting facts without emotion. We engaged what we believed to be a primitive species with basic technology. Within minutes, we were surrounded by a fleet of over 400 vessels with capabilities far exceeding our own. Our weapons were largely ineffective. Their weapons disabled our ships without destroying them. The battle lasted 11 minutes. We lost 359 ships. The humans offered surrender terms. I accepted. They boarded our vessels, treated our wounded. And then their commander informed me that they have been preparing to fight the Dominion for 200 years. She claimed they have infiltrated our empire at every level. She claimed they were about to launch coordinated uprisings across Dominion space. Then they released us and told us to deliver their terms to you. The recording ended. Krathus looked at his advisors. Analysis? The intelligence minister, a thin Vorath named Sekther, stepped forward. Your Majesty, we have been investigating the claims. I regret to inform you that they appear to be accurate. Within hours of the 7th Fleet's defeat, we began detecting unusual activity on multiple conquered worlds. Communications networks that we thought were secure have been broadcasting messages simultaneously. The message is always the same. The word Terra, followed by instructions for coordinated rebellion. Possible, Krathus said flatly. Our security services would have detected a conspiracy of that scale. I thought so as well, Your Majesty, Sekther replied. But it appears the humans did not need to create a conspiracy. They simply planted the seeds of 1 decade ago and waited. They infiltrated conquered worlds and told stories. Stories about a powerful species called Terra that would someday come to liberate the oppressed. These stories became legends, myths that spread through underground networks. The conquered species did not know if Terra was real or just a comforting fantasy. But they hoped, and they prepared. Small groups on thousands of worlds, all waiting for a signal that might never come. Until 3 days ago, when the signal arrived. Another advisor, the Minister of Military Production, spoke up. Your Majesty, the rebellions are spreading faster than we can respond. The subject species that serve in our military are deserting or turning on Vorath officers. Supply lines are being sabotaged. Communications are being jammed, and we cannot determine which of our own people might be human infiltrators. The paranoia alone is crippling our ability to respond effectively. Krathus stood and walked to the main display. He stared at the map of his empire, watching green indicators multiply as he looked. Rebellions on over 3,000 worlds, not coordinated in the traditional sense, but all acting toward the same goal. The dismantling of Vorath control. Assembled a grand armada, he said quietly. Every warship we have, every reserve vessel, every ship in construction that can fight. We will go to this Terra, and we will burn their world to ash. We will show them what happens when you challenge the Vorath Dominion. Vecthon cleared his throat. Your Majesty, with respect, the humans clearly anticipated this response. Commander Zelthius's report included details of human defensive capabilities that suggest a direct assault on their homeworld would be suicide. They have transformed their entire solar system into a fortress. Moreover, if we pull our fleets back to strike at Terra, the rebellions will spread unchecked. We will lose half our territory before we even reach human space. Then what do you suggest? Krathus snapped. That we negotiate. That we accept their terms and simply abandon an empire it took 3,000 years to build. I suggest we recognize reality, Your Majesty, Vecton said carefully. The humans have outmaneuvered us completely. They studied us for 2 centuries, while we ignored them. They prepared for this conflict, while we grew complacent. They turned our own conquered subjects against us, while we assumed fear would keep them obedient. We are not losing this war because they are stronger. We are losing because they are smarter. Krathus wanted to rage, to order executions, to do something to reassert control. But he was emperor because he was capable of accepting hard truths when necessary. He looked at the display again, really looked at it, and saw the reality of the situation. The Dominion was collapsing. Not from external assault, but from internal revolt. And the humans had engineered it all with patience and precision. Show me their terms again, he said finally. Sekther brought up the document that Admiral Chen had transmitted to Zelthius. It was surprisingly simple. Immediate cessation of all military operations. Withdrawal of Vorath forces to the 10 core systems. Independence for all conquered species. Reparations to be negotiated. And one final clause that made Krathus's mandibles clench with fury. Any Vorath vessels found outside core systems after 30 days would be destroyed without warning. Terra was not negotiating for peace. They were dictating surrender. If we refuse, Krathus asked, then they will continue to support the rebellions until our empire tears itself apart, Vecton said, and then they will come for the core systems. Your Majesty, I have reviewed the battle recordings from the 7th Fleet. The humans were toying with us. They could have destroyed every ship in minutes, but they chose to disable and capture instead. They were sending a message about their capabilities. If they wanted to conquer us, we could not stop them. But they do not want conquest. They want us contained. The Minister of Internal Security, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Your Majesty, there is another consideration. The humans have claimed they have infiltrators in our government and military. If this is true, we cannot trust our own people. Every order we give might be compromised. Every plan we make might be leaked to the enemy. We are fighting blind against an opponent who can see everything we do. Krathus walked slowly back to his throne and sat down heavily. 3,000 years of conquest. 3,000 years of Vorath dominance. And it was ending not with a glorious final battle, but with a whimper of defeat orchestrated by a species they had never even met. How long until the Grand Armada can be assembled? He asked. 16 days, Your Majesty, Vecton replied. But I must again advise against. I am not asking for advice, Krathus interrupted. I am asking for information. The humans have given us 30 days. We will use 16 of those days to assemble every ship we have, and then we will go to Terra, not to burn their world, but to demonstrate that the Vorath are not cowards who accept defeat lying down. We will go there. We will show them our strength. And then he paused, the words bitter in his mouth. And then we will negotiate from a position of at least having shown we were willing to fight. Vecton looked relieved. It was not the best outcome, but it was better than a suicidal assault. I will begin issuing orders immediately. One more thing, Krathis said. Send a message to this Admiral Chen. Tell her that the Emperor of the Vorath Dominion wishes to speak with her directly. If she believes we are defeated, let her face the leader of the Empire she has brought to its knees. Let her look me in the eye and explain why Terra has the right to dictate terms to a civilization that ruled the stars before her species left their homeworld. The message was sent. The response came back within an hour. Admiral Chen would meet with Emperor Krathis, but not in Vorath space, and not on neutral ground. The meeting would take place in the Sol system, in orbit around Terra itself. The Emperor would come to them. It was another calculated insult, another demonstration of dominance. But Krathis had no choice but to accept, as he watched his advisors leave to begin preparations. Krathis allowed himself to think about the historical irony of the situation. The Vorath had built their empire on the principle that strength was all that mattered. The strong conquered the weak. The powerful dominated the powerless. It was the natural order of the universe. But Terra had shown them something they had never considered. That patience was a form of strength. That preparation was a form of power. That sometimes the most devastating attack was not a strike from the front, but a trap set generations in advance and triggered at the perfect moment. The Vorath had conquered 1,000 species through direct military force, and Terra was defeating them without firing a shot at their homeworld. They were simply stepping back and letting the Dominion destroy itself from within. Hastened by rebellions that Terra had been cultivating for decades, Krathis looked at the displays. One final time before leaving the war room. The green indicators were still spreading. By the time the Grand Armada reached Terra, the Dominion would control perhaps a quarter of its former territory, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The humans had not just defeated the Vorath in battle. They had defeated them in a contest of wills, of patience, of long-term strategic thinking. And the worst part was, Krathis suspected that the humans had known from the beginning that it would end this way. They had written the conclusion to this story 200 years ago. The Vorath had just been too blind to read it. The Grand Armada emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and every sensor on every ship immediately screamed warnings. Emperor Krathis stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and stared at the displays in disbelief. He had expected defenses. He had expected a strong military presence. What he saw was beyond anything he had imagined. Earth's moon was not where it should be. Luna, the natural satellite that had orbited the third planet for billions of years, had been moved. It now hung in space between Mars and Jupiter, its orbit perfectly synchronized with the gas giant, and its surface was no longer gray and cratered. It was covered with structures. Thousands of weapons, batteries, shield generators, sensor arrays, and facilities whose purpose Krathis could not even guess. The moon had been converted into a mobile fortress, a weapons platform of such immense scale that it dwarfed anything the Vorath had ever constructed. "Your Majesty," the sensor officer reported, his voice shaking, "I am detecting weapon signatures across the entire system. The asteroid belt is not natural. Most of those objects are artificial constructs or have been hollowed out and equipped with weapons. The orbital space around every planet contains hidden installations. And there are," he paused, rechecking his readings, "there are minefields. Thousands of mines positioned along every possible approach route to the inner system. We would lose half the fleet just trying to reach Earth." High Marshal Vecton stood beside the Emperor, his expression grim. "They have had 2 centuries to fortify this system. Every resource, every innovation, all directed toward making Terra into an impregnable fortress. Your Majesty, we cannot win a battle here. Even if we destroyed every human ship, the fixed defenses would annihilate us." "I can see that, Marshal," Krathis said quietly. He had brought 18,000 ships, the largest single fleet the Dominion had ever assembled, and he was looking at a defense network that could destroy them all without human soldiers ever leaving their barracks. "But we are not here to fight. We are here to show that we came. To show that the Vorath do not simply roll over and accept defeat. Open a communication channel to Admiral Chen. The channel opened, and Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen. She looked older than in the previous recording, or perhaps it was just that Krathis could now see the weight she carried. This was a woman who had spent her entire life preparing for war, who had trained thousands of soldiers and ordered the deaths of thousands more. Her eyes held no anger or hatred, only tired determination. "Emperor Krathis," she said in perfect Voroth, "welcome to Seoul. I assume you are here to discuss terms rather than to attack, given that you stopped at the system's edge rather than advancing. That shows wisdom." "Do not mistake caution for wisdom, Admiral," Krathis replied. "I came here because you demanded it. I brought the Grand Armada to show you that the Vorath are not defeated. We still have strength. We still have pride. And we will not simply accept whatever terms you dictate." Chen nodded slowly. "I respect that, Your Majesty. Pride is important. It gives meaning to our actions. But pride without wisdom is just arrogance. Let me show you something." She gestured, and a new image appeared on the screen. It showed a star map of Vorath space. The green indicators had spread further since Krathis had last checked. Over half the Dominion's territory was now in open rebellion. This is the current state of your empire. While you were assembling your fleet and traveling here, we were supporting revolutions across your territory. Not by sending troops or ships, but simply by providing information and coordination. The species you conquered are liberating themselves. We are just giving them the tools and encouragement to do so. You're destroying an empire that took 3,000 years to build," Krathis said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Do you feel proud of that achievement?" "No," Chen replied, and there was genuine sadness in her voice. "I feel tired. I have spent 45 years in military service, Your Majesty. I trained for a war I hoped would never come. I prepared for an enemy I had never met. And now that war is here, I find no joy in it. Only necessity." She leaned forward. "But, let me be clear. I do not feel sorry for the Vorath. Your empire was built on conquest and oppression. You enslaved entire species. You erased cultures. You committed genocide when it was convenient. Every species you conquered has stories of Vorath brutality. So no, I do not mourn the fall of your empire. I mourn the fact that it existed at all." Krathis felt his mandibles clench with fury, but he forced himself to remain calm. "You speak of morality as if Terra has never committed violence. As if your species is somehow pure and righteous. We are not pure," Chen admitted. "Humans have committed terrible crimes throughout our history. We have fought wars against each other. We have enslaved and oppressed our own people. We know what evil looks like because we have seen it in ourselves. But we learned, grew. We decided that when we went to the stars, it would be better than we had been on Earth. And then we found the Vorath and realized that evil existed on a galactic scale. So we prepared to fight it." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was harder. "You asked if I feel proud. Here is what I am proud of. 200 years ago, my ancestors could have revealed themselves to the galaxy. They could have joined the community of spacefaring species. But they saw what the Vorath were doing, and they made a choice. They chose to stay hidden, to watch and wait and prepare, to sacrifice their own dreams of exploration so that future generations would have the strength to stop an evil empire. Billions of humans lived and died, never knowing if the threat was real or if they were preparing for nothing. But they did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. That is what I'm proud of. Not the victory, the sacrifice." Krathis was silent for a moment. Then he said, "You said you came here to negotiate, but all I hear are justifications for destroying us. So tell me, Admiral, what are your terms? What must the Vorath do to satisfy Terra's thirst for revenge?" Chen's expression softened slightly. "This is not revenge, Your Majesty. This is justice. And the terms are simple. First, all Vorath military forces withdraw to the 10 core systems immediately. Second, every conquered species is granted full independence. No strings attached. No puppet governments. True freedom. Third, the Vorath Empire dismantles all weapons of mass destruction and reduces Military forces to levels sufficient for system defense only. Fourth, reparations to the species you have harmed, to be negotiated through a neutral mediator. And fifth, she paused, the Vorath agreed to a century of monitoring. Terra will maintain observation posts in your territory. Any attempt to rebuild your military beyond agreed levels or to conquer other species will result in immediate intervention. You are asking us to accept permanent humiliation, Krathis said. To exist as a subject species under Terra's control? No. Chen replied firmly. We are asking you to exist as a normal species. To defend your own territory without threatening others. To trade and interact with other civilizations as equals rather than conquerors. What you call humiliation, most species call civilization. The Vorath can have a future, Your Majesty. But it will be a different future than the past 3,000 years. Krathis looked at the display showing his empire in flames. He thought about the warriors who had served the Dominion faithfully for generations. He thought about the legacy of conquest and glory that defined Vorath culture. And he thought about the simple fact that he had no choice. Terra had won before the first shot was ever fired. They had been patient when the Vorath were aggressive. They had been subtle when the Vorath were direct. They had prepared for centuries while the Vorath had grown complacent. If I accept these terms, he said slowly, what guarantee do I have that Terra will not simply conquer us anyway? That this is not just a trick to make us disarm before you attack? Chen smiled, but it was a sad smile. You have no guarantee, Your Majesty. Just as the thousands of species you conquered had no guarantee when you offered them mercy in exchange for surrender. You must take it on faith. But consider this. If we wanted to conquer the Vorath, we could have done so already. We have infiltrators in your government. We have your military plans. We have weapons you cannot counter. But we have not attacked your core systems. We have not bombed your worlds or enslaved your people. We have simply forced you to stop doing those things to others. That is the difference between Terra and the Vorath Dominion. We do not want to rule you. We want to stop you from ruling others. There was a long silence on the channel. Finally, Krathis spoke. I need time to discuss this with my advisors, of course, Chen said. You have 48 hours. After that, we will assume you have rejected the terms, and we will proceed with military action against the core systems. I hope you choose wisely, Your Majesty. There has been enough death already. Channel closed. Krathis turned to face Vectin and his other advisors, who had been listening to the conversation. Well, tell me what you think. Tell me there is some way to win this. Vectin shook his head slowly. There is no way to win, Your Majesty. We can only choose how we lose. We can reject their terms and fight until the Vorath are extinct. Or we can accept and survive as a diminished but living civilization. It is not the choice any of us wanted, but it is the only choice we have. The other advisors nodded in agreement. The Minister of Intelligence spoke up. Your Majesty, I have been analyzing the human strategy throughout this conflict. They have shown remarkable restraint. They could have destroyed the Seventh Fleet completely, but chose to capture survivors. They could have bombed our cities, but instead supported rebellions that minimized civilian casualties. They could have used their infiltrators to assassinate Vorath leaders, but did not. Everything they have done suggests they genuinely do not want genocide. They want compliance. Compliance is just another word for defeat, Krathis said bitterly. Perhaps Vectin replied, but defeat is just another word for survival. And survival means we have a future. Our children will live. Our culture will continue. We will lose our empire, yes, but we will keep our home. In time, perhaps we can prove ourselves worthy of rejoining the galactic community as equals, rather than conquerors. It is not the legacy you wanted to leave, Your Majesty, but it is better than leaving nothing but ashes and memories. Krathis stood in silence for several minutes, staring at the displays. The Grand Armada floating uselessly at the edge of a system they could not conquer, his empire burning behind him as species after species threw off the chains of Vorath rule. And ahead of him, a species that had spent 2 centuries preparing for this exact moment with a patience and determination that the Vorath had never imagined possible. Finally, he spoke. Open a channel to Admiral Chen. Tell her the Voreth, accept her terms. We will withdraw to the core systems. We will disarm. We will pay reparations. We will accept monitoring. And we will try to learn how to be something other than conquerors. He paused, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. Tell her that Terra has one. When the message was delivered, Chen's response was surprisingly gentle. Tell the Emperor that no one has one. War never produces winners, only survivors. But I thank him for his wisdom in choosing survival. The Voreth have a long road ahead of them. Learning to coexist as equals will be difficult for a species raised on supremacy, but it is possible. And Terra will help, not as conquerors, but as guides. That is our promise. Emperor Krathus ordered the Grand Armada to return home. As the ships began turning away from Sol, he looked one last time at the fortified moon, the armed asteroids, the weapon platforms that filled the system. This was what 2 centuries of focused preparation could create. This was what happened when a species decided that something mattered more than immediate gratification or glory. The humans had sacrificed generations of normal life to prepare for a threat they might never face. And when that threat finally appeared, they had been ready. The Voroth had conquered 1,000 species through military might. But Terra had defeated the Voroth through something far more powerful. Patience, planning, and the absolute certainty that some things were worth waiting for. As his ship entered hyperspace and Earth disappeared from view, Krathus understood that the age of Voreth dominance was over. A new age was beginning. One where Terra would stand as guardian against empires like his own. And perhaps, in time, the Voreth would learn to be grateful for that. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday, when enough time had passed and enough healing had occurred, they might look back and realize that Terra had given them something more valuable than conquest. They had given them a chance to become something better than they had been. The word Terra had meant destruction to the Vorath dominion. But for the galaxy, it meant hope. And hope, it turned out, was the most powerful weapon of all.